Welcome to the Born and Raised Music Podcast.
That's as good an intro as any.
Let's do it.
We got Zack Roskop on the show today. This is something that we've been excited about for a while. It's going to be a recurring segment called Beer with Zack, even though I was drinking coffee because it was pretty early in the day for me.
I'm not sure I was drinking beer.
You drank a beer.
I drank a beer. Yeah, I think you're right. I've been doing the no beer all year kind of thing. I started back in October, and I kind of fell apart here in March.
It's strange times when I'm the responsible one. It should never be that way.
2020's gotten the best of me.
Oh, jeez. You're telling me. So, yeah, Zach's great. He's a great guest. He's been doing this podcast thing for a while, being guests on other people's shows. He also has his own radio show on WUTK that is all about beer. And, beer and music worlds line up a lot, and it's the perfect marriage. So it makes sense that we talk about these together. Zach will end up ultimately be trying to talk about the music industry, but we'll refer to things in the beer industry. And you'll see plenty of that hear plenty of that when we get there.
Right, and he's also our office mate, so dear friend of ours. We have learned a lot from him. He's learned a lot from us, and we're excited to hear his questions and all of that good stuff.
Yeah, and it's not just a marriage of convenience. You know, he's got a lot of really great things to say. He's a really funny guy, really really personable, and we love working.
And his brew tours
him.
are amazing.
His brew tours are amazing. Definitely go check that out when appropriate to get back together in groups of people.
Well, with that, let's... the other thing, if you really dig our intro song, this is our second episode. We didn't mention it in the first one, but Chris Mathian, our good, lovely friend Chris, who no longer lives in Knoxville, but is still a Knoxvillian in my heart, he wrote this song for us, and he's actually got a lot of really great music, so we encourage all of you guys to go check him out. Just Mathien.
That's it. Yeah, his entire catalog is incredible. Definitely go check out everything he's put out because it's all gold. And we gave him no direction for this theme song.
No, and he crushed it.
He said, "What are you looking for?" We said, "We want you to figure it out." He said, "What's it called?" And we said, "Born and Raised." And he said, "Bet."
Done. Here it is.
So I guess we're recording right now.
Oh, yeah, of course.
We've been recording.
Okay.
Always be recording.
We're probably going to cut most of the first 10 minutes.
I mean,
So we have Zack Roskop from Knox Brew Tours on today. This
What's
is
up?
actually a really cool concept that you brought to us that we are pumped about. Take that, computer. Sorry, I just knocked my
did you
computer off
do?
the table. No, but we're really excited about it because it allows us the opportunity to answer some questions and, I don't know, question some things ourselves. So,
well, I find that like there's a lot of great podcasts out there, and they tend to be people who are super passionate and in the world of whatever it is they're podcasting about.
Thank you. That's very sweet of you.
You guys
didn't say us. You didn't say us.
No, you guys are definitely included in that because I've heard you guys record some of these. But I think it's kind of an interesting idea to take a minute and to bring in sort of an outsider that's not in it.
Crossover episode.
Yeah, to sort of like get your mind, because I'm so in beer. Like my mind, craft beer. Like, and sometimes someone will ask me a question that's so simple and basic, and not in a bad way, but like I didn't even think about that. And
Right.
so, my hope
what
is
is hops?
Yeah, and I just kind of wanted to like pick your guys' brains a little bit about Born and Raised and your podcast and what you all are doing and for Knoxville and stuff. But also I've got some kind of weird questions about the music industry that I've been dying to know the answer to.
I like it. And I think this might be, if it goes well, it's going to be a reoccurring thing,
I
hopefully
hope
monthly.
so, because I have an infinite amount of questions.
So if someone, say, had a question for themselves that they wanted you to ask,
Yeah.
where could they send that question to?
Just contact at knoxbrewtours.com. I know
Send
this
them.
sounds crazy, but if you're listening to this right now and you have a question for Born and Raised Productions, you can email me at knoxbrewtours.
Don't email us. We won't answer.
And I will ask the question. Okay, let me start over. If you have a question for them that you want them to answer, message them. If you have a question for them that you're embarrassed to ask, message me.
What's a music?
Yeah,
What's the music?
What's a concert?
I will ask the questions you're afraid to, if that's what you need.
Yeah, I like it. I
Yeah.
can't wait for you to get a bunch of booking requests.
Yeah, it's coming. We'll just count on it.
Crazy.
Hey, can you book our
So
band?
you
for
have
us?
infinite questions. We have, I'm sure, limited answers, but we will try our very best.
Where do you want to start?
Yeah, what do you got? Hit
Okay,
us.
so I've got 2 new questions that came at me today. Just a
Good.
quick disclaimer. I know that we haven't talked about these, so hopefully you guys will
Some hip shots here.
Yeah, just a few. But okay, so we're seeing a lot changing in the world of virtual reality, right? And there's this idea that the NBA was toying with where you could actually purchase the opportunity to watch a basketball game live from your couch with a virtual reality headset and see it from courtside. You could essentially buy courtside seats from your couch. Do you think that's something that will be incorporated in live concerts? And if it is that what impact do you think that might have?
I don't anticipate that will be a big thing for concerts. Maybe for a little while as a novelty. The NBA has been on the cutting edge of customer experience for years and years. They do an incredible job at it. But this is one of the things that I know you wanted to talk about festival streaming.
Yeah, festival streaming is on my question.
And that's a little bit different, but one of the core brand propositions of live music is that it's a shared experience with people being in the same place. Like there's a lot of advantages that bands can have for, reaching people in a live setting in their homes, but I don't think that putting on a VR headset is going to replace the experience. Maybe there's something there on a smaller scale as kind of like a niche thing, but I don't anticipate it being like a huge thing in the live music world.
And maybe it should just be a small thing for like individuals who, for whatever reason, maybe they can't leave their house.
Sure.
Or maybe they can't travel to that location or something like that. But you're saying that might be a small percentage.
Yeah, so there was a startup, I want to say in 2013, and I can't remember their names to save my life, but they approached a bunch of people in Music Row when I was in Nashville and had some technology that would essentially take everyone's iPhone videos and were able to act as a switcher between all of them. So it would record them all to something and then edit a fan-sourced video of the
Feed
concert.
Of the concert.
And it was a really cool concept. It never really got off its feet because it took so much bandwidth, especially at the time.
It probably took away from the experience a little bit too if everyone's just holding their phones up.
Yeah, and so there was a big push around that same time of like, I think a lot of musicians themselves romanticize about the authentic experience between their fans. And so they were fighting, and still to this day fight against having smartphones and things of that nature at their concerts. You see different bands basically banning cell phones for their concerts. And stuff
there was
like
a
that.
concert at the Mill and Mine where they took your phone when
Yeah.
you walked in. You got your phone on the way out.
Yeah.
That usually comes from the artist's side if they think that it's becoming too invasive and is diminishing the experience for everybody around, not just the one person holding up a phone.
Right.
Because you guys know I'm huge Switchfoot fans, and I went to a bunch of their shows last year. And one of my best photos of John Foreman is actually a picture of the person's phone in front of me who was taking a picture.
They had a
of John.
better phone, and you're like, oh, that's better.
They had a better phone, and they had a better angle, and they were taller than me. So that was kind of my only option. But,
Yeah.
Yeah.
But Garrett, the thing you're talking about, didn't one of the bands that you worked with or managed use that to create a music video? Am I remembering that correctly?
I don't remember.
I feel like it was Joy of
pulled,
Painting.
I don't think we ever pulled it off.
Are
I
you
don't
sure?
think we
'Cause
ever
I feel like
we've
I have a memory
definitely
of seeing this music
I've
video.
definitely seen music videos where people record themselves singing a song, and then it's just a mashup of all those recordings.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But that's different.
This is a little different. But I
Yeah.
think the VR experience in general, I think it's got probably a place in every entertainment, like revenue or stream or whatever market, I guess. But I don't see it taking on like a replacement of a ticket because there is an energy. I think the things that we actually experience
You can't feel the bass in your chest.
Yes.
right. The
Yeah.
shared experience is what I think what people are most attracted to live entertainment for.
That's funny. Feeling the bass in your chest is always the example I use for the experience of of a live show.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's just like it's a certain energy that can be kind of hard to articulate, but everybody feels it when you're there and experiencing an actual live show. But also, we're live music promoters, so all of this we're pretty biased, right?
Yes and no. I mean, if I saw, we're in the music industry to make money. If I saw an opportunity to make money in VR, I would take it.
Yeah,
stab at it. I
that's a good
just
point.
don't see it.
This is kind of an extreme example, but like if hypothetically we knew 100% that the Rolling Stones were going to do a show in London and it was the last show they were ever going to do ever.
It's a very
Specific,
real possibility that
Right?
could happen very soon. Yeah,
And I could pay $150 to put on a
For the
VR
VR?
headset and be on the front row of that concert. That's the only opportunity. That's the closest I could possibly get to that experience.
right. That's exactly it. I think there are very unique experiences where it could make more sense than just like a general across the board, like all concerts are doing a VR option now. And basically, it all comes down to two things, right? It's demand and cost.
Right.
As the cost of these technologies go down, you may see more people trying it out just because, like, hey, it doesn't cost me all that much to give it a shot. And there has to be enough demand for people to actually pay for the experience to create a revenue stream to, take over to pay for that cost and then some.
And if it ever got to a point to where it was kind of popular, then the cost of the ticket to go to the show would go down, which would if there's less people are going, then that might encourage more people to actually go to the concert.
I think
and
it would
go
actually
up.
work
The
the other way
opposite.
around, because we see it in the sports arena right now, is that ticket prices for sporting events have only gone up because of broadcasting. So broadcasting, the average family can't afford to bring their whole family to a UT football game now.
Yeah.
I don't have $400 to throw down on a football game, but you know what? I can stay at home and watch it for free.
That's a good point. The NCAA and sports writers have been bemoaning for the last like 5 years to a decade about declining attendance numbers, and a lot of it has to do with increasing television contracts. And
Right.
the prices for tickets have not gone down; they've gone up.
Interesting.
Well, and then you're seeing a lot of these stadiums and arenas replacing a lot of their capacity for higher level experiences, because they're like, well, it's harder to sell 20,000 tickets. We can actually probably sell like 5,000 tickets at like a higher price and just offer a better experience.
Yeah.
Which you might end up seeing. I mean, we are seeing it in the festival scene already, is that any package you could possibly imagine to buy at Bonnaroo, you can buy. You can spend $20,000 on some sort of package at Bonnaroo.
Right.
The Roll Like a Rock Star package, I think they call it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They basically treat you like an artist.
And people pay it, man.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And
Shoot,
they
I had
keep
the
selling
money, I
those
would.
out. Yeah. So I think we're going to see that continue to go up, and maybe that means a more affordable option, which is similar to VR. I don't know if VR is the case, but maybe that is a thing. I don't know.
Yeah. Okay, I've been dying to ask you this next question.
Okay.
Can't wait.
Here
We
we go.
all are about the same age. All right. We
Yeah.
all experienced PlayStation 1 through whatever they're calling it these days. What impact on the music industry do you think Guitar Hero had? On the people of that time period listening to and playing music that they were maybe not familiar with or were familiar with, and even the impact it might have had on the artist. Because when Guitar Hero came out 1, 2, and 3, it was, and Rock Band, I think it definitely had to have had a positive impact. But how?
This is an impossible thing
Oh,
to
we're
ask
just going
for
to
its
pontificate. We
Yeah,
have
this
no-
is all conjecture. Based on its effect on the music industry writ large, there's no telling, man. I mean, there's so many variables involved. I would have to imagine it's a positive if it had any effect. But I think the biggest impact, what you mentioned, is on individual bands that had songs in their, like Silver Sun Pickups is playing The Mill and Mine tonight. They're one of my favorite bands ever. I had never heard of them until Lazy Eye was on
Guitar Hero?
not Guitar Hero, the other one,
Rock Band.
Rock Band. And I nailed it on vocals, guitar, and drums. Just FYI.
I mean, there's a generation of kids, and I'm putting kids in quotes here, but there's a generation of kids that did not know "Sweet Child of Mine" by Guns N' Roses if it wasn't for Guitar Hero.
I think it probably inspired a lot of the younger generation to pick up an actual instrument. I feel like I saw a lot of like okay boomer moments of old people complaining like, oh, the kids don't care about playing guitars anymore. They want to play their guitar video games. But I think it actually had the opposite effect. I think it inspired people to want to play instruments
Play
more.
a real instrument.
I
yeah.
learned how to play drums I got like the basics of being able to move my arms independent from my feet from playing Rock Band over and over, and then it was kind of an easier transition to an actual drum set. So that was for me. I was in college, I think, when it came out. Don't try to do the math.
That's fascinating. Okay.
But Gary, you got anything to add?
I don't think it had any huge effect outside of the catalog that was on there, and I'm sure the catalog owners loved it, unless gamers, the game companies decided not to pay them as much, because that's not something that's necessarily a blanket license or a mechanical license.
Right.
So it's something that's negotiated on case by case basis. So that license, I don't know, maybe it was a good payday for them, maybe it wasn't. I'm sure at the time they were wishing it was more money, but I would assume now as sync licensing becomes more competitive and those budgets continue to shrink, I'm sure they're looking back being like, man, that was good money.
That's a great point. I love hearing your perspective on all this stuff, because Zach asked the question and I'm like, playing guitar is fun. And you're like, who's making money off of this?
Yeah. I mean, I would assume it was good for the artists' careers long term. It probably helped bands like Weezer and even Radiohead. I mean, I can think of a couple of them that crossed over to a younger generation and probably extended their career.
That's a great point about Weezer. I mean, Weezer's like the quintessential Gen X band, and then Say It Ain't So's on Rock Band, and all of a sudden you bridge the gap to all these millennials, and Weezer's still going strong today.
To that point about crossing generations, there was recently an interview with Dolly Parton, who is surprisingly still relevant amongst younger generations.
Yeah.
And she actually credits that to playing Hannah Montana's mom on the TV show.
Interesting.
So that there was...
Wait a second. Say that again.
Not her mom, her aunt. Her aunt.
Really?
Yes.
I never knew that.
In the Disney show Hannah Montana, which was very popular amongst a certain younger demographic, Dolly Parton played her
That's right.
aunt. And so all of those kids, as they grew up, who associate her with playing that role on that TV show, she says that she thinks that is a big reason why she was relevant with that age group, was because of that TV show.
That's amazing.
And she is technically like her godmother in real life or whatever.
Right.
But
right.
It's fascinating how technology or entertainment can cause your music to be relevant with a different generation. Mm-hmm. Like maybe Weezer was for people younger than us, or Guns N' Roses, for example.
Yeah.
With, Guitar Hero being relevant in that way too. That's fascinating.
And Dolly's transcendent.
She's
Saint
Dolly.
I'm so thankful for Hannah Montana to introduce Dolly to the youngins.
To the youngins, yeah. Okay, all right, next question. The headline that we hear or that we see is some version of, I mentioned this to you all before, Taylor Swift loses music.
Right.
Or loses the royalties, or loses rights, or loses masters. From my perspective, as a person that not in the music industry and not knowing what all of that means, from my perspective, it's really hard to imagine this artist who appears to be on top, who appears to be raking in the dough. I mean, having successful album after successful album, albums that span the entire world, and it's hard for me to wrap my mind around the idea that she potentially doesn't control or own the music that she wrote. So,
right.
Can you make sense of this for me?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that you have to get into what can you own. So I think this is one of those confusing parts of the music industry that I think the industry likes to kind of keep out of the public eye, because it was originally designed to mislead artists, the way that it was designed. So if you look at the intellectual property of a song,
right,
there's several things in that song that you can own.
Okay.
First starts with the publishing or the writing of the song. There's the actual arrangement and
I
composition.
put these words in this order over
with this melody
chord
and this
change or
harmony,
yeah.
And you can own that. But the weird thing about that part of it is that there's actually 200% to that song.
Okay.
There's 100% of songwriting credit, and there's 100% of the publishing credit.
Okay.
Which is just created to mislead artists.
Okay.
But then beyond that, you actually have the sound recording, which is the audio files, the zeros and ones. Now they're zeros and ones. Before they were tape, but it was the actual recording.
Okay.
The audio sounds of that, so the performance and production of the song. Those are two separate things, and typically, especially 15 years ago, which is when Taylor signed this contract. Labels own the master recordings. They still own the master recordings to this day. That's still a pretty common, common practice. Yeah. So the master recordings, what they will do is essentially they'll work with a label, a record label, and they'll say, "Listen, we want you to help us grow our music. We want you to put out our music, and release this record," and the label will agree to it and say, "Great, well, we're going to own the master recordings of this record, and we will pay you a royalty based on how well it performs, how well it sells." And those deals can get incredibly complicated, especially the older ones. They're getting more and more artist-friendly, but they're also starting to encompass more of the revenue
Are they getting
streams.
more artist-friendly because the artists are getting smarter and there's more of them?
Yes.
Or there's more... it seems like the label's avenue to promote is getting smaller, and with technology and with the internet,
it's the democratization of music.
The platform for artists is getting larger.
Right, and it's easier to find success without a label.
So this is what somebody like Chance the Rapper means when he
exactly
talks about owning 100% of his music by being an independent rather than going to a record label.
Right,
and wasn't it like a thing when Macklemore came out that he was independent too, right?
I don't know if he's still independent, but
I don't think he is. I think he's with Warner now.
Maybe.
Say.
That doesn't necessarily mean he doesn't own his music, though. Like I said, these deals are changing.
They distribute it, right?
Yeah. There's all
like
sorts
in the
of
beer
deals
world,
now.
like Wicked Weed Brewery in Asheville, North Carolina was, they people say they sold out, quote,
Right.
but really what they were interested in wasn't anything other than the distribution market of Anheuser-Busch. It was getting the beer to the public.
Yeah.
Which I remember Mute Math, which I was a huge fan of, had this independent album, but they signed a deal with Warner just so that Warner would distribute the album.
Right.
Which is fascinating as well.
Right. So there's a lot of different ways you can go about this, but you have to give context to when Taylor signed this deal. So Scott Borchetta was a big wig in Nashville, decided to start his own label. One of his first signings was Taylor Swift.
Okay. Jackpot.
Yeah, exactly. There's a handful of others that I think ended up doing well, but Taylor Swift was like his bread and butter. And so he has this independent label. It doesn't have much. It has Taylor Swift, though. And even as it's continued to grow, its catalog is still based around Taylor Swift. So he signs this deal, likely a 7-cycle deal, the record cycle. So how many records are you going to put out with this label? How many records does she have?
It's not based on years.
It's not based on years. It's
you
based
could do
on
7 albums in 12 years, or you could do 7 albums in 6 years.
Yeah. So
I love that you just casually asked me how many records Taylor has. Like I just have that information.
Do you?
Just on hand? I don't.
Oh, okay. I would assume. I think it was
sounds right.
I think it was 6 or 7 because she just left. Reputations, I guess, was technically the last one. So, she goes through this cycle. He owns all of those master recordings because he's invested an enormous amount of time, energy, and money into building this brand with her. So she also still owns her publishing rights unless she's sold those or signed those off.
Right.
She owns the songwriting. So, because she wrote those songs, and she still gets paid royalties on the master recordings. So it's not like she's not getting paid. She just doesn't control that audio recording. It's up to the owner of it, right?
So the owner could sell it to a commercial without her permission?
Yes. They would still have to get the permission from the publishing, though.
Okay.
So she still has some control over it. But the master recordings also ultimately... usually is the hardest part to get. The publishing is pretty easy.
So it sounds like the short answer is she didn't lose it because she didn't have it.
She never had it to begin with. She was trying to buy it back from him. So she wanted the opportunity to buy it back from Scott Borchetta. they were in negotiations, even though she said she didn't have that. This is a he said, she said kind of situation. But he mentions in his writing that he gave her the opportunity and they were working towards a deal that just ultimately fell through. And I think that this is where the sides really start to form. And I think I can empathize with both because I can see how she feels betrayed. I can see how she feels attacked and bullied by the people that were involved in this. But I also, as a business owner and as a person who's invested an enormous amount in building a company that's ultimately at this point responsible for hundreds of people, could say, well, I can't sell you this catalog. It's the vast majority of our company's catalog. What do I have left over?
Yeah.
And so, you know, he could try to sell them separately, but he's not going to get nearly as good of a deal. I would assume. I wouldn't do it that way if I were him. So I can empathize with him in that respect. But his choice to sell it to who he sold it to is the thing that really drove her crazy. Is that Scooter Braun is a manager. He manages Kanye, or at least at the time I think he might still, but manages Justin Bieber. And Kanye is obviously not in the good graces of Taylor Swift.
There's some, pardon the pun, bad blood there.
Yeah.
Oh, I like that. He doesn't have a good reputation.
Oh man. Keep him coming. Keep him coming. Okay. So there's that part of it, is that she felt like she had built this career with Scott Borchetta. She helped him build his empire in Nashville, and then he turns around and sells it to her arch enemy, which I think she has built up in this story. I mean, she's a master artist at manipulating headlines. I don't think Scooter is this big bad wolf that she's making him out to be, but I also don't think he's necessarily...
He cares?
Yeah, I don't think he cares. I think he's just a business guy that said, oh my gosh, Taylor Swift's recordings are up for sale. I'm going to buy these. I would do the same.
Do we know how much that was? Do we know what that number was? I mean, is
I don't know off the top of my head, but I would have to assume it's a lot. So to give you guys context, this is a completely different part of it, but a similar case happened with the publishing of Paul McCartney and the Beatles.
I was going to say, didn't Michael Jackson own the Beatles at one point?
Yeah, so Jackson bought the publishing rights, not the songwriting rights, the publishing rights to all of the Beatles catalog. This happened in 1985. They lost their publishing rights through a really bad deal with, I can't remember the guy's name. It was their first publisher and Brian Epstein, their manager. So that was kind of mishandled. They wanted Paul always wanted to buy it back, but it just never had the chance. The publishing rights inevitably made their way into this Australian billionaire's hands, and he was like, well, let's see what I can get for these. 2 years prior to that, Michael Jackson and Paul McCartney were talking about this, and Paul was like, oh yeah, money's in publishing. You got to buy people's publishing. People love the classic song. So if it's a commercial classic hit, you want to own the publishing. That's money for forever.
So Paul planted the seed for that.
Yeah, he didn't realize
led
it.
to Michael Jackson
exactly.
his
so
music.
2 years
and
later,
they were friends, right? At least 2 times I can remember collaborators.
They had two collaborations. This was before the purchase, obviously.
Which one's your favorite? I'm partial to The Girl Is Mine.
The Girl Is Mine. Yeah. But that deal ultimately broke up their relationship completely. But he bought it for $47 million. Fast forward, ATV bought publishing from Michael, which now became Sony ATV. So the company was called ATV. Michael bought. Sony bought half of it, and then ended up buying another 75% of it, and valuated it at like close to $1 billion. The publishing. So that's what it's worth now that he lost out on. That Paul McCartney lost out on. And of course he can't afford to buy back his publishing for $1 billion. But so you can see how like these things, especially with someone like Taylor Swift, who's just got a list of hits, those master recordings are going to be worth a ton.
Yeah.
And the rights to these things probably, you may or may not know about this specific part of it, but do they just like bounce around as record labels start to consolidate?
Yes.
Yeah.
I mean, that's what when, was it Warner, I believe, bought EMI?
Yeah.
Was it Warner? There was a consolidation back in like 2010, and 2 of the majors merged. Mm-hmm. But yeah, they took all of that catalog with them.
Wow.
And so like that happens a lot. And ultimately, the artists are still getting paid their royalties from their contracts. So it's not like they're not making money, but they don't have the control over their original music. And so there was a lot of artists that came out and said, these artists deserve to control their music. And on one hand, I agree with them. They should definitely be able to control that music, but they sold it. It was your choice to sell it. You signed the contract. Granted, she was 15, but she had a lawyer and she had a father that looked at this contract. And if you look back at how it paid off, I would say it was probably worth it.
Oh yeah, she's doing fine.
Yeah, she's doing just
She
fine,
signed when she was, 15, 16?
15, yeah.
15? Yeah, I mean, if you leave a 15-year-old alone to go out and promote themselves independently, like, there's no way that they could possibly be expected to reach the same level of success
I think
of having label support like that.
Scott changed the industry in Nashville. Everyone was chasing his trends.
Yeah.
And he started signing up artists left and right that were leaving major labels. So, like, he clearly is a talented guy. He knows what he's doing. And I think that you can't discount his ability
His value.
to...
I
Yeah,
know
his
this
value
is
in the
like
scenario.
Complete sort of subjecture, I guess. But like, why do you think he sold to Scooter instead of Taylor? I mean, was it personal? Was it just the dollar amount? I mean, or just no comment?
I can't imagine that he would have sold it out of spite, because that's just way too much money. Like, I don't think he's rich enough to be able to be like, who cares? I'm just going to give it to this guy because whatever. I think that Scooter probably made a really aggressive offer, and I know that wasn't the first offer that Scott was looking for. He's been talking about selling for years. Taylor was aware of it. So everyone knew that Big Machine was up for sale.
Taylor couldn't match the offer? I mean, that seems hard to imagine with as much success she's had.
The offer that Scott brought back to her was another label deal. And it was like, you can get all of your masters back one record at a time.
Oh.
Which he says that's not how it works. It's the moment she signed the contract, she got all of them back, but she would still be on the hook to put out 7 more records with Big Machine, and then he would ultimately turn around and sell, and then she would be stuck with that person.
Same situation.
Yeah, but now she would actually have to work with Scooter versus being like, well, he owns my old stuff, but I get to work with filling the blank
I know a
for my
lot
new
of artists
stuff.
are really wary about signing long-term deals like that because you don't know how the label's going to change and if they're going to try to inject their own ideas of what your art should end up being. So I could see that being a tough offer.
You have to also
consider.
understand that, like, when she signed this deal, 2005, record deals were just structured completely differently. Now we can see how you can make a successful career without a label. That wasn't an option in 2005.
Right.
I mean, think about it. Like, illegal downloading was like at its peak in 2005.
It was peak LimeWire time. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So, like, giving the context to the industry, like, you're going to sign that deal where you look back at it today and go, well, that's a stupid deal.
Yeah.
But you have the context of exactly.
And time's changing faster.
Oh yeah.
Rapidly. Yeah.
So in theory, is Taylor Swift right now like a free agent?
She already signed a deal. She signed a deal.
Okay, she signed a deal.
Yeah, she signed a deal before all that went down.
Okay.
So I want to say
not
she's with
Scott,
Universal
or whoever the Scott guy.
I think she's with
signed
UMG.
with somebody else.
Yeah.
Okay. All right, I've got one more question for you.
Okay.
I recently looked up, fun facts about the music industry. And one of the fun facts was it said that the average dollar amount that it costs to make an artist relevant in the United States or in the UK is between $500,000 and $2 million. For a label to take an artist and put them into the world.
Mm-hmm.
What does that mean exactly? What is that money being spent on?
We'd have to start with defining the word relevant.
Ooh.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, there's indie labels putting out records with $100,000 right now, and I mean, you look at the Lumineers. I guarantee you they didn't spend $500,000 at the beginning on them.
I guess that stat that I read. What do you think? What would you be your best guess on how that money's being spent? I mean, I'm assuming radio, like mainstream radio, still seems like it has.
Yeah, marketing. I mean, radio promotion would fall under marketing budget, but marketing in general is just awareness. You have to spend all that money to see if think about there's 300 million people in the U.S. So to reach full market saturation, it's going to take an enormous amount of money. You're seeing the same thing play out in politics right now, but it just takes a lot of money to see if people will like it or not. And then you spend all this money and you realize, you know what? The song didn't resonate. So it's a huge risk for a lot of these labels to take on of like, yeah, we're going to spend $1 million pushing this to radio. I'm pushing this to all the different places.
And that was a much more common thing probably 15, 20 years ago. Like which is why kind of one-hit wonders are kind of a thing of the past to a certain degree.
100%.
Like when radio and record labels were the gatekeepers, they would just flush all this money into one artist like OMC.
Yeah.
And it's like, well, people kind of got sick of How Bizarre a little quicker than we thought. So this is probably it for them. And then they just kind of fade into obscurity. I'm so sorry, OMC, for
I'm
singling you
imagining
guys
the El
out.
Camino right now.
How bizarre. Yeah.
But yeah, I would say it goes to radio. Radio's becoming less relevant. Like a lot of labels are saying now their streaming team is bigger than their radio team, which I think is crazy. There is tour support, so some of that money goes to help supporting a band on tour. And you know, the easiest way to grow is to get people out to shows. And it's like, you know what? And any other tour, it wouldn't make sense for us to throw this much money into the marketing budget. But we're just considering that label marketing. We're going to see the return long term, not on the actual show, and we'll recoup that from record sales or streams or record sales.
Yeah, and part of that
streams
too,
and things like that.
Part of that too, with the democratization of music and the internet kind of being this grand equalizer, that happens less too, because you're able to kind of see case studies with bands on if they're able to build an audience before they get that kind of money put behind them to reach whatever the definition of relevancy is. So you can look at streaming numbers, you can look at social media numbers, you can look at independent artists are doing better, I think, now in touring, and you can look at their touring numbers, and before you try to put that kind of money behind a band, you can be a little bit more sure that money is going to end up paying off in some way, because you've been able to see how people engage with them, if their music is good enough and people are connecting with it, before they make that decision. As far as how much money it actually makes to get a band from that step to the next step, I don't know. 500,000 sounds like it should do it.
Yeah, I hope.
But I don't know. I don't really know for sure.
I worked for an indie country label, and we definitely threw over $1 million towards trying to break an artist. It was Maggie Rose.
Oh, great.
We went to radio with 4 singles, I want to say. I believe it was 4. And yeah, I guarantee you we spent over $1 million on those 4 singles.
How'd it work out?
Work?
Didn't work. I don't know. It depends on how you measure it. I mean, from a financial perspective, massive failure. I think that she definitely grew some fans. If
you're spending $1 million financially, is probably how you're trying to measure
probably
it.
how you're measuring it. She made some inroads. I will say, looking back at it, I don't think we went about it the best way we could have, but it was at the time as country music was pivoting. So like we were just watching streaming affect country music. Country music is always like weirdly 5 years behind the times, and you would think they would go, okay, cool. Well, we know that, so let's go ahead and start putting. We have the ability to go ahead.
See the foresight.
Yeah, exactly. But they don't. They don't do that, and so we were still playing an old game right at the turn when streaming started to come in and other numbers were affecting stuff. Satellite radio was strangely a huge part of it as well.
Part of that for country music specifically is they don't adapt that quickly because they don't have to. That's where their listeners are. I mean, country music is still, or at least pop country, radio country, I should say, is more relevant in radio than other genres by a wide margin right now. The record labels and radio stations still have a huge amount of power in who they promote on their air than, say, hip hop or indie rock or alt rock or whatever other genre you want to throw in there.
Interesting.
Mm-hmm.
I love it. I have like 1,000 more questions, but I know that we don't have 1,000 more minutes.
Sure we do.
We're at. No, we can keep going if you want to go a little bit longer, and we can always just split this into 2 podcasts.